Fiction, science fiction, horror, fantasy, crime, LGBT, thriller.
You have now entered the House of Mystery.
Welcome back into the House of Mystery, and I'm Al Warren. We got Mr. Two Hands Whiskey Sour Martino in the room.
Yes. I
I
prefer an old-fashioned.
Oh, yeah, that's it. Sorry.
But I will take I tried to get a whiskey sour, and I ended up with a martini.
Well, why is that?
That happened. Oh, no, it wasn't a martini. It was a, what's the other drink that's similar?
Oh, old-fashioned sour, I don't know.
I don't know.
What do I know?
I ended up with the wrong drink. I drank it anyway.
Well, of course you did. It's not like you to waste.
Yeah.
You know, Mr.
The group I was just with, somebody else got my whiskey sour.
Oh.
Because they didn't have old-fashions.
Oh, why didn't they have...
Oh, it was a margarita. It was like a vodka margarita.
Oh.
Or something.
Oh, protest.
Yeah.
Why don't you get the sign and get out there and protest like everyone's doing now? Get out there and start. And you're all ready for Thanksgiving soon? Kind of?
Oh, yeah. Getting there.
Yeah. Stuffing your turkey?
Yeah, exactly.
No, I don't do the American Thanksgiving anymore.
Yeah.
I stopped, because I had one in October. One turkey's enough.
Yes.
We get enough of them on here. No. Oh, boy. How can you say that? Why would you talk that way? Anyway. So, let's see. Who have we got today? We have got an author. He's done a lot more than that, but we'll get into that. And his new book, What Are the Odds? Sounds like kind of my life. Mr. David List, thank you for coming on the show.
I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you for having me.
Well, it's a pleasure. Hopefully you're happy at the end.
Oh, now that I listened to both of you and I've made myself a martini, I think it's going to go really well.
Perfect. Well, we're pretty relaxed here, We're one of the few left. David, wow, you've had quite the history, and you've decided to go into book writing, which I don't know why. I've had 35 books published, and I live on the street. So why did you get into writing a book? Like, what led you to writing a book? And this is kind of a crime fiction humor in that. So what took you down that road?
Like you, it was the dwindling bank account. What am I going to do here? I better do something. And now, again, you're right. Experiencing it, that's what's going on my tombstone. It's just going to read, what the hell did I do that for?
Well, I think when we write these books, we don't always know what to expect. I didn't know, so it's just sort of as I got into it, and I'm glad I've done it now, years later. But it's quite a journey.
Yeah.
Unless you're like Matthew McConaughey or something, and I'm not putting him down, but I'm saying if you're a star like that, where you can put out a book and dump a lot of copies just because of who you are, it's a lot of work.
It is an enormous amount of work, no matter what genre the book is. Obviously, I think if it's nonfiction, you might have a little bit of an easier time because you're telling true stories. You already know the beginning, the middle, and the end. Within fiction, it also depends, again, on the plot structure. So I think not only is it just about the writing, at least for me, and I have a big whiteboard that I keep there. Yet you have to also have a very, in a way, analytical mind, just to keep track of where you are in the story. I think, again, I don't really know just this, if there was any real active thinking, I want to do this. I originally wrote it as a screenplay, but it was COVID. If there's one thing people had on their hands, it was free time. And I did have these, flashes in my head of scenes that I would have included in the script, but you can't. Other characters that I would have had in there, but you can't because of just the economy of the screenplay. And it was just one day I just said, let me just give this a shot. I really had no expectations of it, but the longer and the more time I spent at it, I myself just started thinking, this isn't too bad. It's the type of thing I would want to read or see. And then ultimately you get to that final, where you're just so ready to be done with it. And I got to the end. I had really no expectations beyond that, other than, man, I hope this doesn't prove to have been one big waste of time.
Yeah, it depends. I think you kind of have to look at it. when you create a book or a story and you put it out there, instead of what other people think or how many awards it wins or if it sells a lot, you got to think about if you're happy with the story, did it turn out the way you wanted it?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I think that's the ultimate, because popularity and fame will come and go, and you can't rely on that. You kind of got to do what's in your heart, right? So.
Yeah, I mean, again, I didn't do this for any ego purposes at all. It was really, and again, and having worked in the film business for the majority of my career, the novelty of any of these sort of ego-driven aspects of it wears off pretty quickly. And then it's strictly business. So for me, it was just business. I hope this has a payoff of some kind. Otherwise, for me, it just would have felt like a waste of time, an exercise. But it didn't. And it attracted, big agents in New York, and then sold not that long thereafter. As you know, if you are lucky enough, fortunate enough to make a deal with a legitimate publisher, it's a long haul. I mean, from the time we made the deal to the time the book's pub date was just over 2 years. And I was being told I was on the fast track. That's like, which I can believe it in a way, because when you think about the fact of this latest Fletch film, Confess Fletch, with John Hamm, ultimately, like I say, it ended up leaving Warner Brothers, made a pit stop at another studio, Relativity, which has since, filed bankruptcy, and then back at the new, Miramax. So from the time I set it up to the time the film actually got made was 22 years.
Yeah. The only way you get things done faster if you go to a Diddy party. I mean, you got to get in where the action is, and then all of a sudden you're on the screen, right? It's game on.
I've lived out here for many years, since '88, and truth be told, I grew up in and around New York City. I've never, ever fully felt like I fit in out here. And only in this town, I guarantee you, there are people that are, with all that's going on with him now, that are pissed off that they weren't on his guest list.
Yeah.
I remember that same thing happened in the Heidi Fleiss days, that people were irritated they weren't in her black book.
Yeah. I'm mad I wasn't on his guest. I was on the guest list that just let me outside. They wouldn't let me in the house. That's like, well, how rude. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, we all know what was going on outside that house, Alan, so no getting over there.
All of that stuff that goes on, Harvey Weinstein, all these things that are going on behind the scenes really affect people trying to do a real story or a real play or a real movie, or because you don't realize, but that affects the whole community, and working through that, it can be a struggle.
Very much is a struggle. I mean, the town, as I say, is littered with people who just disappear into the woodwork or fade out of it because they just don't want any real part of that. It really, there's an aspect of it that is toxic in your life. When you really see, and this doesn't apply to everybody, obviously.
Right.
And there are also, thousands of people that are just like anybody else. They have salaried jobs, maybe at a studio but they're just general workers. They're affiliated with an entity that is in the media business, but they're not directly involved in movie making. They're, just like anybody else at a company, and they just live their life. Those that are really entrenched in the more public aspect of it, I don't really socialize with any of them. It sounds so cliche in a way, but it's a corrosive way to live if you really want to flourish. There are similar aspects of that, in the book world. You're right. You mentioned someone, whether it's a Matt McConaughey or someone with name recognition. Absolutely. They drop a book, which whether or not they even actually wrote it or most of it is up for question, but it's immediately going to sell. And in a way, I kind of understand it. The fact of their celebrity, it gives the marketing people at the publishing house something to work with. It also lets the book sellers know it's going to attract attention simply because of who they are. And whereas a debut novelist, even with the major publishers, you'd be hard-pressed to even get the big papers to even review it. And the bookstores, they don't really even want to carry it.
Yeah.
Because again, especially, at least as it was explained to me, where the fall is the better season to where the publishers will release their more important books. I think on the same day or within a week or two of my book's pub date, it's like 10 of the most best-selling authors in the country also released their books. From Grisham to Lee Child, Richard Osman,
Dave Martino. Well, and the thing is, they put you on. They don't put you on the table when you walk into the bookstore. The big chain, right? They've got David Baldacci, and they've got those people right when you walk in the door. It's on a table, and it's
not only on the tables and on the shelves.
Yeah, it's all over, and they get posters and all that stuff. Whereas regular authors like yourself, it'll be you'll be on the shelf, but you know what I mean. It's just not the same.
You'll be on the shelf where the spine of your book is showing because it's being used as a separator between the other author's books.
Yeah. That's right. Who was that? There was that author that changed his name. I forget his last name so that he could be right beside a real famous author in a bookstore. And I can't remember now who told me that.
I told my publisher, I said, change my name to Stephen King and spell it with a V.
Yeah.
We'll make more than we'll have to pay out in a lawsuit.
Yeah. What'd you think? Yeah, I think, that's a good idea. Yeah, it really is,
Just wouldn't go for it.
No, they don't go that far. So what's you put this, now I get, just from the name and from the look of the book and just from the reading the little blurb about it and stuff, I'm getting at that it's kind of a crime thriller, but there's humor involved.
Yes, it's not joke humor.
No.
It really is. You can't really do jokey humor and still have a thriller. And I wouldn't even really call it a thriller in the conventional sense, but it's like anything else. And, they have to box your book into a category. It's only humor that really comes out of who the three main characters are and the situations they find themselves in. If you cross that line into jokes, you'll lose whatever thrilling aspect of the book there is. At least I believe that.
Oh yeah, no. That's why I said humor, because you got to have the timing. If you do a joke, it usually doesn't fit.
Yeah, there's not one joke in the book. It's just their dialogue, even the banter between them. It's never done. I believe, and again, you can't. And I don't mean this to sound preachy, but it's never allowing a character to say or do anything with the intention of being funny. It's just funny because of their worldview and how opposite in many ways each of these characters are, but underneath it, in the real important things in life, those similarities come out. The title really comes from, it's something, who hasn't said at some point in their life, when something happens, what are the odds? Nobody, that's who hasn't said it, everybody has said it. And it just sort of explores in a way that sort of theme that when the odds of something happening in your life are so astronomical that they're incalculable, is it irrational to not write it off as chance or coincidence? And whether or not we are on some unforeseen, invisible path that's predetermined. On a whole other level, like I say, it's kind of a biblical theme in a way. The three main characters, one is a former NYPD detective out of the Bronx. He's been wrongfully forced out of the force and stripped of his pension. You've got an IRS revenue agent in Houston who's been investigating the CEO of an oil company because they know they're cooking the books. It's 5 years it's going on, this investigation. They just can't figure out how or where the money's coming from. There's one guy on the inside of the oil company that he believes is the one guy with a conscience that's going to help him out. And unfortunately, in a bizarre twist, that guy ends up embezzling millions that were due to the IRS as tax money that year, and he disappears. Now, the odds of these three guys' paths crossing are incalculable, but they do. And when it happens, it propels them on this journey from Costa Rica, trying to get back to Houston. That is just this outrageous, wild ride with a lot of action, at times it is, harrowing and death-defying. You learn the backstories of each of these men and how they actually got where they are, which turns out really not to be, except for Ray, the cop, not really, nothing, very little is what you think it is. But along the way, it takes them on a much deeper dive and the reader to life's issues of love and loss, loneliness, friendship. And I think on the jacket cover, I think it even says this, and a commitment to, larger values than oneself. And it does so in very unexpected ways. That's really, really to me the heart and soul of the book. I think it's like anything else also. All three of these main characters, in one way or another, whether it's physical, characteristic, emotional, personality, are all me. I think that's, I would also say, I think that it's the old adage, kind of write what you know. I think, though, that these sort of issues are universally relatable. This cop, Ray Dawson, I've known a number of cops over the years, and many of them are cops to the bone. That's another thing I don't have this in the book, but I've talked about this, where it's, to me, a great misconception in the world. When you hear someone say, well, it's just your job, it's not who you are. That's a load of crap as far as I'm concerned.
Right.
Our jobs reflect exactly who we are. And the reason so many millions of people are unhappy in their jobs is because they're in jobs that don't reflect who they really are. A lot of cops, like Ray Dawson, they're as much a cop as they are a man. He's from a lineage of cops. Now he's been tossed out of the force unfairly because of today's societal, what's going on out there, and stripped of his pension. But the one thing he never ever thought possible would be being given a second chance to get back together with his second ex-wife, who he knew was the love of his life, and nothing is going to stop him this time. And he, talks to his former partner, who's still a cop in the 41st in the Bronx, and he uses much of his savings to set up this just amazing romantic weekend in Costa Rica, where he's going to propose again for the second time, but promises himself over and over that this time he's getting it all right, everything. And it is a spectacular weekend until the elevator doors open on his way down to this amazing dinner that he set up. And in walks this wily, neurotic, environmentally conscious guy named Wilbur Bailey. It's a funny scene that happens in the elevator, and let you know, the prologue actually sets the tone for the entire piece. Ray recognizes this guy. He can't put his finger on it yet, but he can't let it go. And he sneaks off into the bathroom in the dining, in the restaurant to check with his former partner, and finds out this guy is a fugitive, one of the 10 most wanted by the IRS with a $5 million bounty on his head. And out of the corner of his eye, he sees him across the lobby checking out, and he can't let it go. These questions, what are the odds? It's been dogging him since the age of 4. And it goes from there. And then, the third guy, Phil, he's sent down there to try to retrieve this guy when he doesn't end up back in Houston as planned. Seems, for those people that are reading it to hook you in. You've got film agents now also trying to set up a film rights deal, which in turn would help book sales, obviously. But that, at its core is really what it's about. Firmly grounded in reality, but at times, goes to the edge of almost absurdity. And the result, at least that's what I was aiming for, is just this emotional ride of highs and lows that is pretty intense.
There you go.
Holy moly.
Well, speaking of your characters, you come from writing screenplays, which are, kind of presented to be shown visually. Do you see your characters? Do you hear your characters? Is it kind of visual for you when you're writing?
100%.
Do you also have an inner monologue? Can you hear your characters, or?
100%. Yes.
Do they let you drive still then, or?
and surprisingly, that's a yes too.
Of course. Nowadays, anything goes, right? So.
They'll see me having that inner dialogue play out right in the car by myself.
Yeah, nobody cares now. It's just go for it.
But the answer is absolutely yes. It's funny. The publisher, once everything was done, they align you with an editor that they believe is the best editor for you, and they align you with a gentleman named Dana Isaacson, who's worked with many New York Times best-selling authors. It was one of the first things he honed in on, how cinematic the book was, but that he wanted to work with me on, especially on a number of scenes, on the point of view, because you're still, at certain scenes, writing it as if the camera is the point of view, as opposed to the character. And he wasn't wrong. Little things like that. It did get a terrific Kirkus review, and they even alluded to that. They said something like, his screenwriter skill set is on full display. And ultimately gave the book a really terrific, he was very complimentary. And I think ended it with that this is an outrageous and outlandish comic thriller. So, again, I'm hoping it has a film life. The film business is also very, very difficult today, especially at the major studios. It's almost as if the film is not based on a Marvel comic or the like, it's not getting made. And these sort of pieces, like what's in this book, it's not easy because no matter even if they love it, because once you have a film that is on the road, so to speak, it means one thing: expensive, because you're constantly moving the entire crew. So we'll see. But it is 3 great roles for actors. I'll give it that.
Did you write it with that intention, or not at all?
Not at all. There's a point where obviously certain actors will come into mind as, boy, they could do a great job, or, oh boy, if they were just, 10 years younger, it would have been great. I mean, my whole frame of reference, I think anyone that reads it also, they're classic sort of heroes, harkening back to the days in our generation. They're, Ray Dawson, could easily be, the Bruce Willis Die Hard version of who he is. So at some point, you're thinking, boy, he could have been great. If I had not spent so much time in the film business, whether or not I still would have thought about that sort of stuff, I don't know. But it didn't affect, the dialogue, the banter, which I think is one of my stronger suits. I mean, for that, especially if you're going to attempt to infuse humor into a piece like this, you really do have to know the characters better than you know yourself. And in terms of, exactly what they would do and say in certain situations, and have it be genuine and not feel forced and so on.
You know who would play the heroin addicted dishwasher? That could be that could be me. I mean, just throwing that out there, just in case,
And I didn't want to bring up any real bad news here though. But I did actually suggest you, and they passed.
Yeah, since I lost my hair, nobody cares about me. It's just...
That was the first thing they said. They said, Dave, the guy's wearing a torn hairnet. What are we going to do with him? With a hairnet on that head? No way.
Yeah, I know. It just doesn't work.
I said, no, let's build him a wig that has a hairnet attached. And go with that.
Yeah, nobody cares anymore, Get a certain age and they just move on, It's just...
if it's going to have a film life, like I say, the buyers, the studios, those putting up the amount of money it takes, they don't really care how the characters are written. Who is a big enough name that I could stick in any one of these roles? I don't care if they're physically right for it. I don't care if they're the same gender as that role, but that's going to give me any shot at getting my money back.
Did you write this with a meaning? Like, is there a subtext in this book? Even if it came out organically, maybe when you wrote it and at the end of it, there's sort of something you would hope people would pick up besides the entertainment?
I think there definitely are subtexts to the book. Whether or not people will pick up on them or not, or whether or not that was intentional, I don't really know. But I think given, again, mostly because of the media today that really just is in everybody's head 24/7, and just how polarized everything is, I think this book, it just really shows you that when you strip away all that stuff and you find yourselves in potentially life-threatening situations, none of that other person's beliefs about anything that differ from yours matter. That you really focus much more on the more important aspects of life. There's a friendship that can develop from that. And I think that definitely, comes through. Because these 3 men are very different. They all do share some common things. 2 of them lost their wives. One to an illness, one in a head-on collision with a kid strung out on coke and weed. The other lost the love of his life. So loss. Loneliness is, something. I mean, some people have said some very complimentary things, including, I'll never forget, Dana. I mean, here was an editor that has worked, like I say, with some amazing authors. And once said, that there was, and this was months later, that there were, scenes in the book that he said that have just really stayed with me. And I think it's within those scenes is to me, the heart and soul of the book. All the craziness that goes on in this adventure is just for the fun of it. With the book, and just thinking about your question, I think if anything, and the prologue, I think, captures this. It's that moment in life that happens to a lot of people when you wake up and you look in the mirror and just wonder, how the fuck did I get here from where I started? In the prologue, which I think represents that, you don't know where you are. It's just these dry, dusty, rolling hills. And you know what dust devils are? You ever see dust devils?
Yeah, oh yeah.
Yeah. There's dust devils blowing around everywhere. One of them blows right over this pool of blood, which drains off to the side and ends at the feet of these two guys who are standing at this edge of a massive ditch, almost crater-like ditch. They're dirty, bloodied, scraped up. Their hands are bound behind their backs by electrical cords. But what's most striking about them is they're both buck naked except for their shoes. The guy on the left is this cop, this former cop, Ray Dawson, who's in his mid to late 40s. From his physique, you can tell, though, he's still tough as nails. And he's got these 3 bullet hole scars on his back, each labeled with a tat. One reads 44 up by his shoulder. One down by his waist reads .38 from a .38. And the one right near his heart, the kill shot, the tattoo just reads first wife. And the guy next to him, skinny as a rail. Skin is beet red from what's obviously the first time it's been out in the sun. And all you hear him say is, and Ray Dawson, by the way, he's sitting there just contemplating, how did a romantic getaway in Costa Rica, where I was going to propose for the second time to the love of my life, go this far off the rails? It's almost like he doesn't understand it. And Wilbur Bailey just says 567,983,402 to 1. The odds our paths would cross, give or take. And that's when Ray just says, 1 in 1. The odds I'll kill you myself if you don't shut the fuck up. That scene really is that moment you look in the mirror. How the fuck did I get here from where I was? Then the story takes you back now and guides you through this wild journey until how did these two guys end up at the edge of this ditch? Where, by the way, right after Ray says that, 1 out of 1, I'll kill you myself, a guy starts rising out of this ditch, and he's wearing like cartel attire, and he's got an AR rifle, slung over his shoulder, and a bloody machete in his waistband. And as he comes out of this ditch, he's holding 2 severed heads with blood that's still dripping from their necks. One of them still has a lit cigarillo dangling from its mouth, and just holds them up to Ray and Wilbur, and just says, "These the men who robbed you." And that's the end of the prologue. And then it takes you on this crazy journey of how they ended up at that ditch, and then on what happens from there. And I will say this, it does have a very fun, unexpected ending. And but that is really the subtext. It's about that moment, and again, like I said, love, loss, loneliness, but mostly in the end, about rebirth. And how at a certain point in life, it really is only the 3rd quarter, and there is still time on the clock. You might just be first catching your stride. And that's really, I hope, again, sometimes I tend to go a little long-winded and off on these tangents, so I hope I did answer your question.
I don't know, you're pretty shy.
Yeah, you don't want to be around me when I do crawl out of that shell.
Yeah. So listen, let's talk about, the book is out now, and do you do social media? Are you doing a website, all that stuff? Where do people find David? Lemonade stand?
Yes, or, usually in the middle of the intersection with the cardboard sign.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'd always had, a Facebook page and, never really, it's not like I was ever that active, but even once I made the publishing deal, the publisher told me to get more, try to get more involved in it. So on Instagram, it's at that David List, It's one of those things. Who would believe that David List was already taken? I mean, what are the odds, man? It's unbelievable. So it's at that David List, which is the same as the website, which was just recently set up, and I'm just trying to populate it now with some stuff. But it's, again, www.thatdavidlist.com. Facebook, it's really just my name. Same with LinkedIn. So yeah, that's where I can be found. You guys, you have to do the Hollywood thing now. You gotta just tell all your listeners how much you love this book and can't wait to read it.
Well, there you go. I don't need to say it now. I don't need to say it now. I'm putting it right on the list, right beside David's new book. It's going to be a tough one.
That does kind of remind me of a story Ruddy had told me with The Godfather. He was this young producer. In those days, Paramount was owned by Gulf and Western, and he had an overall deal now as a producer there, a young producer. And Ruddy had this great, deep, booming voice. He would really talk like this. Just phenomenal.
Well, it's been a pleasure. And, of course, the book, What Are the Odds? David List. Thank you for being here.
Oh, no, I enjoyed it.
This has been a production of the House of Mystery Radio Show. To find out more about our show, guests, or hosts, go to our website at houseofmysteryradio.com.